now we're looking not at, a 2008. We're talking about, again, the scale of that being 5, 6 times and then levered another, 10, 15 times beyond that. You get suddenly, you do the math there, we're up to almost 80 times the scale of a 2008. And so if just a minor $35 billion was enough to shake to its core the foundations of this country's economy, what does 450 billion conservatively, if we trust that only 10% of that is fraudulent, conservatively, what does that do to the global outlook here? Yeah, what I really would love to do is talk a little bit, because I know Juan has talked about, 80 times worse than '08. And obviously you guys were just talking a little more about the muni bonds and the implication there. What I would love to do is explain some of the numbers here so that people can actually hear the scale when we talk about this, of how that's even possible. What does that even look like? So if I may, we can just kind of take a trip in the Wayback Machine. It's 2007. Market is hitting all-time highs. If you bought a house in the last couple of years, it's probably doubled. I mean, everything is going swimmingly. And to the average American, you might have looked at that economy and thought, this is incredible. This is awesome. Everything's just going peachy keen. And if you looked a little bit underneath the hood, so to speak, you might have seen a couple things, if you really understood the numbers, that would have given you cause for concern. What you would have seen was that about $2 trillion every day overnight, it's called the repo market. All that means, just for in layman's terms here, is that there is $2 trillion in 2008 overnight that's going from banks or other places to people to make bets essentially on the treasury market every day. And that's just commonplace. $2 trillion is being floated in about 24-hour loans. And you might have said, well, that's kind of a lot of money, but it was fine, because, what could possibly go wrong? It's not like the collateral was good. It was perfect. There was no issues there, except until it wasn't. And again, for scale here, it was about $35 billion of what ended up being toxic mortgage-backed securities, $35 billion of bad assets that drove, $2 trillion built on 35 billion. So, it's maybe 2 or 3% there versus the 97% that's then traded off that. That was the collateral, about 35 billion of bad assets. And that was the cause here that caused Bear Stearns to fail, that caused the entire world here, the entire financial world, to come to its knees off of really $35 billion of bad loans. So not that much in the scale of the numbers we talk about. You can look at the national debt, 40 trillion. I mean, there's huge numbers we can talk about. But it was really just, it started kind of, if you think of a house of cards, or just at the very bottom there, it was all held up by just a small fraction of that being bad. Okay, now moving forward to today, where are we at today? Overnight repo market is about 12 trillion. So it's about 6 times what it was in '08. So already you say, wow, that's a pretty significant difference. I mean, we're 6 times the level we were in '08. And if you think of, well, what is the potential here, what could potentially be toxic? Well, obviously, as Juan has talked about, as we've all talked about here many times, you look at muni bonds. Muni bonds represent about 4.5 trillion, give or take, and that's what's recorded. Obviously, it could be higher, but let's say 4.5 trillion. Let's just take the recorded number, $4.5 trillion. Let's say only 10% is fraudulent. Let's just say let's go really conservative, and you've got people like Nick Shirley that are finding fraud everywhere, and Doge, et cetera. So I think 10% is laughably conservative, but let's just say only 10%. So 450 billion. Remember before, it was just 2%, 3%, 35 billion against 2.5 trillion. So just a couple percent there. This is now 450 billion versus 12 trillion. So a much bigger lion's share there of this treasury market here that is used as collateral. So you've got let's just say again 10%, 450 billion of toxic assets there. Now, the scale, again, that's being traded is just astronomical, this overnight repo market. So what happens is overnight, or over the course of some period, investigative journalists or whatever, this eventually comes to light. This 10% of this is fraud. And that would be kind of the spark here. All of a sudden, that 12 trillion, then even funds that are potentially levered beyond that, start to become toxic. Just as that 450 billion is toxic, it cascades all the way down. And now we're looking not at, a 2008. We're talking about, again, the scale of that being 5-6 times and then levered another, 10, 15 times beyond that. You do the math there, we're up to almost 80 times the scale of a 2008. And so if just a minor $35 billion was enough to shake to its core the foundations of this country's economy, what does 450 billion conservatively, if we trust that only 10% of that is fraudulent, conservatively, what does that do to the global outlook here? We're now at a point where world banks are connected in a way they never have been before. 2008, you saw other countries failing because of what happened here. What happens now when we're even more interconnected? You see a worldwide recession, the likes of which we've never seen. And the point I'm trying to drive home is it doesn't take this massive amount of fraud. We're talking about just 10% of munis being bad as the basis of this is enough to create this cascade. If it's more, it's worse. If it's less, it's still really bad. And so kind of just to draw this out one more time, the fraud's exposed, the confidence collapses, prices fall fast, lenders stop taking the muni bonds, so they demand that liquidity back. That's just greater collateral, so there's forced selling again, and it's kind of this snowball effect. And all of a sudden, they have to liquidate everything. That's real estate, that's stocks, that's bonds, and the whole market is sent into this frenzy of forced selling. And you end up in a position where we find ourselves in kind of a nuclear wasteland, metaphorically speaking, as far as the economy is concerned. And so if you're looking at this, and the only question that really a person should be asking themselves if they're deciding, how serious is this issue, is how much trust do you actually have in the authenticity of things like the municipal bond system, when people like Will Barney and Juan O'Savin have made the brilliant points that they have, and we're exposing fraud at the levels we are, what confidence do you actually have in these systems? And if the answer is not 100% confidence, then you need to be doing some serious soul searching, I would argue, in how you are set up, because all it takes is a small portion of that being toxic to radiate to the rest of the financial world.
The global financial reset is underway and happening now. The battle rages on with competing parallel systems. The current deep state Federal Reserve Central Bank system and the system President Trump and team has developed. While the dawning of the golden age is upon us, we are presently in the danger zone through the reset transition.
Join me and my prominent guests every Wednesday live at 8:30 p.m. Eastern on JMC Broadcasting's backup Rumble channel on X, Facebook, and YouTube. Sign up for JMC's free weekly war report, including notifications of when the Global Financial Reset Show is published. The future is bright, and it belongs to us, not to the global elite.
Global Financial Reset. Only from JMC Broadcasting.